The cold hit me before the doors even closed behind me, not just the January frost clinging to my coat, but the kind that seeped into your bones when you returned to a place you swore you'd never come back to. The small-town church smelled exactly the same: old wood, waxy candles, and the faint sting of something lemon-scented meant to cover up decay. I paused at the threshold. The light inside was dim, filtered through stained glass windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. Snow melted off boots around me, leaving a slushy path toward the pews. Familiar faces, older now, glanced my way, most with half recognition, some with none at all. I was Gary, 41, the youngest daughter, and apparently still the outsider. Mara had planned the whole thing, my older sister, with her clipboard and that clipped tone she used when she wanted you to know she was in charge. Even in grief, her hair was perfect, her suit fitted just right. I hadn't seen her since our mother's last hospital stay. She barely looked at me as I walked in, just a quick nod before she turned back to shaking hands like a politician at a town fair. There was no warmth in her eyes. I scanned the front, our cousins, the preacher, a few old neighbours. Then I looked down at the printed obituary in my hand. Jerry Voss. Voss, 1S. Wrong spelling, and Jerry with a Y, like some old uncle, not me. I held the paper up, checking again. Maybe it was just one copy. Maybe mine was a typo. A woman next to me leaned in. You must be a cousin from the West Coast? I blinked. I'm her daughter. Oh, she said, pulling back, cheeks pink. I'm sorry, dear, it's just... Well, you weren't listed right. I nodded, lips pressed tight. It was a mistake, sure, but I knew better. With Mara, nothing was ever just a mistake. Even now, the seating chart wasn't random. The usher, a teenager in an oversized suit, led me down the aisle, past the family pew, past the reserved signs. He gestured toward a spot in the back, third row from the rear, right next to the restrooms. I sat. The smell of disinfectant hit me before I even took off my gloves. Every few minutes the door behind me creaked open and closed, someone slipping in or out. I flinched at each burst of flushing water. I remembered Thanksgiving. I must have been 8. Mara had her new boyfriend over, and there wasn't room at the big table. I'd eaten in the kitchen with Aunt Winnie and the dog bowls. Some things don't change. I adjusted my coat, keeping my gaze forward. No one turned, not even Winnie, who sat quietly 2 rows up, her scarf tight around her neck like armor. I kept silent. I knew how it would look if I spoke up. Always so sensitive, they'd say. It's not about you, Jerry. So I sat and watched. Mara was flawless, hugging people just enough, wiping at a dry eye with a clean white tissue. When the preacher gave her the nod, she stood and delivered a eulogy like a rehearsed monologue, not one crack in her voice. She was a devoted mother, she said, and she taught us what it meant to be strong, to keep family first. I almost laughed. Delphia, our younger cousin who fancied herself a TikTok influencer, filmed the whole thing with her phone. I caught her mouthing, "Good angle," as she repositioned. Meanwhile, Mara gestured gracefully, her voice smooth. No mention of the months Mum spent alone, the doctor visits. The phone calls unanswered. No mention of me flying out twice, sleeping on a cot beside the hospital bed. I felt the old handkerchief in my coat pocket. The one with the embroidered L, my mother's initial. I gripped it tight. After the service, I stood near the restroom, pretending to fix my coat. I watched Mara speak in hushed tones with someone I didn't recognize. Tall, tan coat, probably a lawyer. She never filed the deed transfer, Mara whispered. It still legally goes back to the Blood family. Blood family, as if I wasn't. I turned away, heart pounding. In my suitcase, buried between sweaters, was a manila folder. I hadn't opened it since Mum gave it to me. Not now, she'd said, but one day when you need to remember who you are. That day might be coming sooner than I thought. I watched Mara walk away, confident, smiling like she owned the place, and maybe she thought she did. I buried my mother that morning. but by the afternoon I knew I'd have to dig up the truth. The service continued, the preacher's voice rising and falling like background noise. I sat where I had been told, still beside the restroom, still ignored, and watched the sanctuary shift from reverent stillness to something looser, less sacred. Murmurs replaced hymns. A few teenagers fiddled with their phones. Mara stood up front, collecting nods and hushed affirmations like badges of honor. Her composure never cracked. I scanned the rows and caught sight of Delphia off to the side, half hidden behind a column. Her phone was held up vertically, camera lens pointed straight toward the front. Not the casket, not the preacher, just Mara. She mouthed along silently, adjusting filters, then typed something before smiling to herself. I leaned a bit to see her screen. Nayi family legacy, Nayi keys strong, next generation. There it was, a funeral turned into content, grief rebranded, a mother's life used as social currency. I bit my cheek to keep from saying something. I wasn't shocked, just tired. The older woman beside me, an old neighbor maybe, whispered to her husband, "I thought the younger one lived out west. What's her name again?" I wanted to turn and say, "My name's Gary. I'm her daughter. Not a cousin, not a guest. Her daughter." But I didn't. Even grief isn't private anymore. The applause after Mara's speech was polite, quick. I waited until the hush settled back over the room, then rose and walked slowly toward the front. My palms were damp. I hadn't planned a speech, but I didn't need to. I knew what I wanted to say, just a few words. A memory. A thank you. Mara intercepted me halfway. "Jerry," she said softly, her eyes scanning for listeners. "We're already over time." "I just want to say a few words." Her smile stayed frozen. "The program's full. Pastor Hines needs to wrap up." We agreed. No open mic. "We didn't agree," I said. She leaned in, her voice a notch cooler. "Now's not the moment to make this about you." Behind me, I felt the silence swell. A few people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Someone cleared their throat, and just like that, I was 9 years old again, being told to sit down while the grown-ups talked. The same feeling of being too loud, too inconvenient. But this time I wasn't a child, and I hadn't asked to take center stage. Just one small space, one sentence. A memory of my mother's laugh or how she hummed while folding laundry. "It's not about time," I murmured to myself. "It's about erasing my voice." Mara turned and walked back to her seat. I stood still for a moment, then returned to my place in the back. The disinfectant scent now even stronger somehow. I noticed the man beside Mara, county official, real estate board maybe, leaning in, nodding as she handed him a folder. The words Keys Estate were clearly marked in bold on the front. I narrowed my eyes. While the preacher wrapped up with the final prayer, I watched her from behind. Controlled, perfect. She wasn't just mourning, she was campaigning. One of the whispers near me caught my ear. "She's handling it all so gracefully," a woman said. "Makes sense she'd take over the family property." There it was again, property. Not grief, not mom, property. I pressed the handkerchief into my palm until the embroidered L left an imprint. My mother's initial, Lorraine. I could still hear her voice from that last phone call. "Don't let them erase you, Gary." I stared straight ahead, no tears, just focus. They were rewriting history and I was watching it happen in real time. Delphia raised her phone again. This time she was filming a close-up of Mara walking toward the exit, the casket slowly being wheeled behind her. I craned my neck to see her screen. The caption read, "The Keys legacy lives on. Some of us stay, others just visit." I didn't need to ask who others meant. Outside, the snow was still falling, slow and steady. I stepped through the old double doors, letting the cold slap me fully awake. The air tasted sharp. Behind me, through the crack of the door, I heard Mara's voice again. "It's all settled now. The property goes back to Blood family." That word again, blood. I stood there a long moment, watching my breath cloud in the air. If they wanted me invisible, they were about to learn how dangerous silence can be. After the funeral, folks moved like clockwork, quiet, mechanical, predictable. Church shoes shuffling on salted driveways, small talk layered over casseroles. I followed the slow stream into Mara's house, unsure if I was expected or simply tolerated. Her home was pristine, not warm, just pristine. Walls painted in soft greys, photos hung at perfect angles. It smelled like lemon oil and restraint. I stepped into the living room and stood still. It used to be loud here, filled with cousins running wild and our mother yelling over them. Now it was too clean to breathe right. The food spread looked like every post-funeral lunch I'd ever attended. Green bean casseroles with fried onions, foil-covered pies from the store, rolls no one really wanted. Disposable plates stacked neatly. I reached for one, but a woman I didn't recognize gently handed me a full plate, smiling like a hostess to a stranger. No one really met my eyes. They glanced past me, over me, through me, like I hadn't grown up in this house for half my childhood summers. It felt like showing up to someone else's reunion. I looked around for Mara, but what I found instead stopped me. On the mantel, above the fireplace, was a framed photo. A big one, glossy, clearly meant to be seen. It showed our mother, Mara, and two of our cousins. Everyone smiling, picnic tables in the background, fireworks in the sky. I remembered that day. I was there. I helped carry the cooler. I helped clean up. I took the picture. And yet I wasn't in it. Not cropped, not forgotten, just gone. Mara walked in holding a tray of empty glasses. I didn't even look at her when I asked, "That picture? I was there." She didn't pause. "You had stepped outside. It ruined the composition." Then she left the room. I stayed rooted. My reflection hovered over the glass of that frame, ghosting over a memory they had rewritten. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I needed air. Out on the porch, I leaned on the railing, trying to slow my breathing. The snow had stopped, but the sky stayed dull and low. Inside, voices floated through the kitchen window. Familiar tones. The updated version was signed months before she got really sick. I had it witnessed, Mara said. Then another voice, Aunt Ruth. "Did Gary get notified?" "There was nothing to notify," Mara replied. I gripped the railing harder than I meant to. Updated version, witnessed, nothing to notify. So this was it. I thought the funeral was the end. Turned out it was the opening act. I shut my eyes and the hospice room came back. I saw myself in that stiff chair by Mum's bed, bringing her fresh socks, cleaning up after aides, calling insurance, quiet things, unnoticed things. Mara had shown up once with a folder. She kissed Mum's cheek and asked for a signature. She didn't stay, said she had a meeting. I didn't say anything back then, thought Mum needed peace more than proof. I looked at my hands, red from cold, empty now. I wasn't crying, I was memorizing. Back inside, I found a napkin, wrote down the words I overheard, names, phrases, updated, witnessed, tucked it into my purse, no confrontations today. That was Mara's game. Mine would be slower, smarter. I knew a nurse at the hospice, kind woman, listened more than she talked. Maybe she saw something, maybe she remembered. As I moved toward the door, I passed the mantel again. The photo stared down at me like a final insult. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, no flash, then typed, "History rewritten, hit send." They thought I'd just mourned, they forgot. I know how to remember the truth. The motel heater kicked on sometime around 5 a.m., a low mechanical hum that sounded more like a sigh than warmth. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that framed photo from Mara's mantel. Mom, Mara, the others, and a big empty space where I should have been. It wasn't just about being forgotten, it felt deliberate. I pulled the motel blanket up around my shoulders, but the cold still crept through. I kept checking my phone out of habit. Nothing, no missed calls, no messages, not even one of those emotionless group texts families sometimes send after a funeral. I stared at the photo I'd taken of that fake family portrait and whispered, "When people start erasing you from the walls, it's not long before they try to erase you from the will." By 9:30, I was dressed and on the road, driving past the church again on my way to the attorney's office. The lawyer's name was Trainer, slick glass sign, polished windows, the kind of place that screamed expensive decisions. Not the kind of place Mum ever would have wandered into unless she was pushed. A receptionist greeted me like I was there to apply for a loan. Trainer emerged a few minutes later, grey suit, no tie, sharp eyes that scanned instead of looked. "I'm Jerry. I believe you handled my mother's estate?" I said, voice even. He nodded like this was just another Tuesday. "Yes, your mother, Mrs. Keyes, signed the revised version of her will in my office. It was her final decision." "Was I notified?" "She said you'd understand," he replied like he believed that line should make everything all right. "Was anyone else present?" "Mara, just her." "Of course, just Mara." I didn't argue, just took the business card he offered, thanked him and walked out into the cold. Confused wasn't the right word. Cornered was closer. At a small store near the corner, I bought a cheap notebook and a blue pen. I wrote down everything. Trainer's name, what he said, how he said it. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I needed something that felt solid, something that couldn't be edited after the fact. I sat in my parked car, pulled up Facebook and messaged Carla, the hospice nurse who'd been with Mum near the end. My hands shook a little, typing out the message. "Hey Carla, I know it's been a while. I just have a quick question about the week before Mum passed. Do you remember anything about visitors or documents?" She hadn't replied when I checked again. 5 minutes later, I sent it anyway. Truth isn't a conversation in families like mine. It's a currency. And right now I was broke. Back at the motel, I slid the keycard through the door and almost stepped on it. An envelope. White, no name, just sitting there like it belonged. Inside, one sheet of paper. Typed, "You should have stayed gone. You'll lose more than a house if you keep digging." That was it. I didn't scream, didn't cry, just stared. It didn't feel like fear. Not exactly. It felt like someone else was scared enough to threaten me, which meant I wasn't just flailing, I was getting close to something. I put the note in a sandwich bag from the motel kitchenette, thought about walking it over to the police, but I stopped myself. Not yet. What would I even tell them? Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. If they'd gone to this length, it wasn't about grief or family drama. It was about erasure, power. Who got to decide what counted as truth? "You don't threaten someone who's powerless," I whispered to myself. "You threaten someone who's close to the truth." I picked up my phone and called a friend back home, a paralegal. Asked, "Hey, what do you know about will tampering? I think something might be off with my mum's estate." She didn't ask for details, just promised to look into it and get back to me. Later that afternoon, I drove to a discount store and bought a tiny recording device, fit in my coat pocket. I figured if they wanted silence, I'd give them silence, recorded, archived, and ready. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was tracking, strategizing. I'd spent so long thinking being the quiet one meant being above the noise. But all it did was make me easy to ignore. By the time night fell, I was exhausted. But this time it wasn't from mourning, it was from building the start of a plan. Lying in bed, I pulled the blanket over me and clicked on the recorder. "My name is Gary Keyes," I said, voice low. "I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing this because I'm tired of being erased." I paused. If they're scared of what I'll find, maybe I should be too, but I'm more tired of being erased than I am afraid of them. Right as I was about to hit stop, my phone lit up. A message from Carla. "Call me, I remember something odd." I stared at it, heart heavy but awake. Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's just the calm before someone finally tells the truth. The morning air outside the motel was still bitter when my phone buzzed. Carla, the hospice nurse, at least responded. I answered, expecting hesitation. Instead, she said, "I need to tell you something about the last week with your mother." Her voice was hushed, tentative. I closed the window shade, leaned back, and listened. She told me that Mara had visited with papers. Mum looked uneasy. Carla said she asked, "Are you sure?" And Mum answered, "I just want peace." But Carla remembered how Mum's hand trembled. She said Mum seemed confused. She said she pulled me into her office for a minute and whispered she was pressured to sign. That was it, external confirmation. Up until now, I'd suspected, but hearing it made the doubt vivid. Peace doesn't always mean justice. Sometimes it just means giving up. I thanked Carla and told her not to worry. I would take care of this. Secretly, I recorded the call. By midday, I was driving to the courthouse. The county building stood grey and solid, bureaucratic. Inside, I asked at the records desk about probate filings. The clerk pulled a file. Mara had filed the updated will not even a week after my mother's death. It was done quietly without notifying siblings. I glanced at the date and nearly dropped the folder. The clerk looked up and shrugged. "It's not illegal, but man, it feels cold." I slid copies of the filing and signatures into my notebook and walked out. The folder felt heavy, but not heavier than years of silence. Later, I found Mara outside the local florist's shop, arranging a wreath. The city block smelled faintly of roses and cold rain. I approached her before she could see me. "Did you send someone to threaten me?" I asked quietly. She didn't flinch. "You have no idea how many people wanted you gone." She stepped closer. "You stir up dust where there should be peace." I held up the typed letter I found under my door. She looked at it. Her lips curled. "You still think this is about justice? This is about survival." My chest went cold, but my voice stayed steady. "I'm not the one who should be afraid." She nodded slightly, as if conceding something I couldn't see. Then she turned and walked away, letting the rain mist her hair but not ruin her composure. I watched her go for a moment, then made my way back to the motel, heart heavy and eyes sharp. Back in my room, I snapped the folder shut and laid out the pieces. The photo from Mara's mantle, the recorded nurse call, the court filing, and that threat letter. It felt like a puzzle, one I refused to leave unfinished. I pulled out my recorder and said into it, "If something happens to me, let this story be told." My voice didn't crack. That was the shift. I was no longer acting out of heartbreak. I was moving by purpose. Just as dusk turned the sky a dull grey, my phone lit up with a voicemail. It was the cousin from that overheard conversation. I pressed play. Her single line echoed, "We all knew what she was doing. We just thought you'd never come back." The room felt smaller then, quiet. Turns out the scariest ghosts aren't dead. They're the ones who remember everything and stop staying quiet. I couldn't stay idle that morning. I sat at the motel's thin fold-out table, the recording device between my fingers, and hit play. The hospice nurse's voice filled the room, soft, uncertain, but clear. She recounted how Mara brought in paperwork during Mum's final week. She described Mum's hands trembling, her eyes unfocused, how she said, "I just want peace." Her tone faltered when she added that Mum seemed pressured, confused. I rewound certain parts, listened again, my lips barely moving. The handkerchief embroidered with an L was in my grip. I rubbed it against my palm and felt the weight of what voice meant. I drafted an email to a probate attorney in Pennsylvania, one with no ties to the family, and attached the audio. This isn't about proving everything to someone else anymore. I was already in motion. I drove to Mr. Trainor's office, sleek glass walls, quiet halls. He greeted me without surprise, as if expecting me. I handed him a copy of the nurse's recording and asked, "Why was this suppressed?" His face shifted, his voice wavered. "Parts are not admissible, unverified." I leaned forward. "Then you are complicit in silencing my mother's last days." Lawyers in the room paused. He swallowed, glanced at colleagues. The tension in that room tasted bitter. He said, Publishing this could result in defamation claims. He slid a cease and desist letter across the desk. I opened it. False statements, reputational damage, demand for retraction. I felt the danger, but not the fear. Better to risk than to let silence prevail. I said firmly, I'll publish truth, not allegations. That evening, I found myself outside Mara's home. Dusk had fallen. The porch light glowed. Inside, I saw shadows moving. Voices, Mara and Dorsey in low tones, a stack of papers on the table. Through a window crack, I noticed her hand shredding documents. It looked deliberate. I snapped a photo quietly. Papers fell to trash. My heart pounded, but I didn't move too fast. They thought paper could erase guilt. It can't erase what was heard. I tucked the photo into my folder. Back at the motel, I laid everything, the nurse's recording, photos, court filing, the obituary copy. I stared at them, then opened a blank document. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring Mum's memory. I typed a public statement draft in case things broke into daylight. I recorded a voice note. If they want to silence me, they'll have to bury me too. My breath shook, but beneath it was resolve. I was no longer fragile. I was armed with truth. Then the phone rang. Unknown caller 208. A voice low and distorted. You've opened a door now, Miss Voss. Be careful what memories you pry loose. My fingers tightened around the phone. I whispered back. I already have. I arrived at Mara's house in the late afternoon, pulling into the driveway carefully. The gathering had already begun. Guests stood on the lawn under strings of lights, soft murmurs in small groups. The air felt tense, like I was stepping into a stage play, already underway. I carried my folder close, every document inside representing part of the fight I'd lived through so far. I told myself, they invited me to this show, I'll just make sure truth is the script. Inside the living room, voices paused for a moment as I entered. Eyes flicked. Conversations resumed, lower, cautious. The room looked elegant. Cream rugs, polished floors, a harp standing unused in the corner. My path led me toward the mantel. That framed photo from before loomed there. I didn't glance at it yet. First, I listened, then Nelia stood. Mara's longtime friend, rarely seen lately, her voice steady but full of gravity. I've held this secret too long, she began. She described late nights when Mara would bring envelopes to their mother, telling her help was necessary. She recalled Mara drafting alternate versions of a will over the years, urging Mum to sign. Then she paused and held up an old yellowed envelope. In this, Mum asked me to guard this for Jerry, Nelia said. She handed it to me. Inside was a draft will, Mum's handwriting, legible, dated years earlier, bequeathing key portions to me. The room's air shifted. Mara's face went pale, her composure cracking. Murmurs rippled. Some guests gasped. Mara rose suddenly and slammed down a thick document onto the coffee table. That's a forgery, she declared, voice ringing. This so-called original was made under duress. Jerry manipulated the draft. I demand it be stricken. She can be disowned legally. She leaned forward, tone authoritative, legal jargon spilled, coercion, undue influence, invalid signature. She stared at the crowd. Many froze, others looked unsettled. My stomach twisted, but I didn't step back. I looked at Nelia at the envelope in my hand. I asked her to read it aloud. Her voice shaky, she recited clauses. Property divisions, offers to care for Mum's medical records. An instruction that Gary never be excluded. As she read, Mara's forged version sat dull on the table, its dates mismatched, signatures off, no consistent notary. A cousin gasped. Someone whispered, "Is she lying?" The room's energy flipped. Mara's control fractured. I stood. Everything in me wanted to stay silent, but silence had betrayed me long enough. I loved her with every breath, I said, voice firm. My silence was never consent. The crowd quieted. I will pursue justice, not mercy. I don't need permission. I demand recognition. I paused, scanning faces. Emotional clarity filled me. I wasn't pleading, I was asserting. Outside, Mara burst out and walked to a fire pit in the backyard. I followed. She held a thick envelope, hands trembling. She tossed it into the flames. The pages caught nearly instantly. She shouted over her shoulder, "You're burning what you'll never own." Flames curled. I stepped forward. But I already owned my mother's truth before I held her property. The fire crackled, burning Mum's paper lies, but not the truth I carried in me. The community hall was packed. Family, neighbours, reporters from the local paper. The banner by the door read, "Memorial and Reading of the Will." Chairs spilled into the aisles, people whispering. I entered quietly, documents pressed flat in my folder. Mara stood at the podium with her back to the crowd, radiating control. She spoke of legacy, of honouring Mother's wishes, of unity. Her tone was measured, practiced. I watched her every move. Did she pause too long before a phrase? Did her eyes flicker toward the back row? This stage felt too perfect, a trap. They invited the world to witness me being stripped away. I'll invite them to witness its return. When Mara stepped down, I approached the podium. "Before we read anything else," I said, "let's read the original will." The hush was sudden. I laid out Mum's handwritten version, dated earlier, clauses intact, her intentions clear. I read how she left the house, the land, her small savings. To me, her daughter. The room held its breath. I pointed to Mara's version, already on display. Look at how the signature differs. Notice missing clauses, dates that don't align. Faces turned pale. Murmurs rose. That's Mum's handwriting. This is proof. Delphia stood then. She moved toward the mic and hesitated before speaking. "I need to speak," she said. She glanced at her mother, then at me. "I posted videos suggesting Jerry was a stranger to this family, that she didn't care for grandmother. They were lies I participated in." Her voice cracked. "I regret everyone. I'm deleting them all and stepping aside." Gasps filled the room. People looked at me. Mara's face contorted with shock and anger. Neighbours came forward, awkward at first. A woman clasped my hand. "I'm sorry I believed her instead of you." A former co-worker nodded. "You were right." Mara's voice wavered as she attempted to address the crowd, but she retreated, stumbling through her words. Reporters pressed microphones. She stuttered and left. I stepped backstage, heart racing. I touched the L handkerchief pinned to my dress, Mum's name sewn into fabric. I whispered into my recorder, "Today I restored her truth. Tomorrow I build from it." I felt the weight of vindication settle, not as triumph, but as responsibility. As I descended the stairs to leave, my phone buzzed. A message appeared. "They're meeting at midnight. Trust no one." My breath caught. Victory in daylight doesn't mean safety in the dark. They called it a memorial and reading of the will, but everybody knew it was a show. Mara made sure of that, sending out invites, calling in the local paper, even posting a flyer in the diner by the gas station. She wanted a crowd. She got it. The community hall buzzed like a hive. Fold-out chairs filled every corner. A few folks were standing by the windows, arms crossed, eyes peeled. I walked in quiet. No fanfare, just the folder in my hand and the truth it carried. Mara stood at the front, chin up like she was running for mayor. She called herself the executor of family wishes and spoke about Mum's legacy with that rehearsed warmth she wore like cheap perfume. Folks nodded, some clapped. I didn't blink, just watched. She was too smooth, too ready. My gut tightened. They wanted a show, fine, but they'd see my truth on this same stage. I remember thinking, you called the world to see me stripped. Now they'll watch me take it back. I stepped forward slow, waited until the hush settled in again. "I'd like to read something first," I said, holding up the old, worn envelope. "This is Lorelei's will, the original one, handwritten, dated and signed. Before any of this," I glanced toward Mara's pristine binder, "existed. I read aloud. My name, the house, the property, every line etched in my mother's hand. The room held still, breathless. Then I laid Mara's copy beside it. Now take a look. Notice the missing clauses. Her tone? It's off. The signature? Not the same strokes. She didn't write this. I didn't need to raise my voice. I let the words sit. Folks leaned in, whispering. Some turned to look at Mara, whose face had gone rigid, lip twitching, jaw clenched. She didn't say a word. Then Delphia stood up, Mara's own daughter. She didn't look at her mother, not once. I need to speak, she said, voice a little shaky but clear. I made videos, ones that said awful things about Gary. I said she wasn't family, that she didn't belong, but I was wrong. Gasps. Movement in the crowd. Delphia looked straight at me. I'm deleting every one of those posts. I won't be part of keeping her out. Not anymore. The silence broke, some clapping, some confused muttering. I felt a strange warmth start to break through my ribs. It wasn't joy, it was something deeper, recognition. Even in Mara's circle, something had cracked. People came to me after that, not loud, quiet, one by one. I'm sorry, someone whispered. We didn't know. You've got guts, said another. Even old Mr. Lancaster gave me a nod. That man hadn't acknowledged me since '98. Mara was unraveling. I saw it in her fingers, trembling as she tried to zip up her purse. A reporter stuck a mic in her face and she just froze, eyes darting. She mumbled something and left, her heels clacking faster than usual. I stayed back in the wings behind the curtain, alone, let the air settle, pressed my fingers against the handkerchief pinned to my chest, the one with the little L stitched at the corner. Mum's. I pulled out my phone, hit record. Today I restored her truth, I said softly. Tomorrow I'll rebuild what she left behind. I didn't cry. Not really. My eyes just got full, the kind of full that comes after holding it too long. And then the buzz. Phone in hand, screen lit up, a message, no sender. They're meeting at midnight. Trust no one. I read it twice, 3 times. The crowd outside was thinning. The air smelled like coffee and old wood, but all I could think was, victory in daylight doesn't mean safety in the dark.